Good evening. If you're joining us right now, this is the Daily Report and it's time for Insight Tonight. And to set us off on this very, very interesting and important conversation, I'd like to introduce a piece by Stanley Nyarugita. Now, they say that they're not the future generation, but the now generation. But the now generation, of course, armed with their phones and their voices, the young people have been able to shake the tectonic plates of politics and governance. This is what experts call a new phenomenon. But here is Stanley Nyarugita, and he unpacks for us the rise of civic awareness in the now generations, from clicks to progress. Take a look.
As temperatures continue to rise along Nairobi's busy streets, so does the conversation on this football field.
Experience especially Article 55. Ukisoma vizuri itakueleza kwamba kijana ni yule mtu ambaye inafaa kuwa educated na kuwa trained na government.
Person pale ndio aanze kuiba ni ngumu. Sababu ana hiyo experience.
In such informal barazas, these two gentlemen, former MCA candidate in Kakamega, Kevin Sifuna, and his compatriot, former Nairobi senatorial hopeful, Justin Misoka, educate the young people on their roles and rights as citizens. They also inform the public on the law-making process.
Wazee ambao wana haki ya kuwa wakae nje, vijana tufanye kazi. Sisi vijana tunakuwa sasa hatuna kazi, tunahangaika tu.
According to IBC, there are 22.1 million registered voters in the 2022 elections. Young people aged between 18 to 34 who had registered as voters were at least 9 million. However, on election day of 2022, a much smaller number should have to exercise their civic duty.
Civic education it is.
2 years later, some of the young people who won't typically toss themselves in the murky waters of politics and governance are very quickly redefining the landscape with social media as their playing field. The hashtag Reject Finance Bill 2024 movement, which saw President William Ruto do away with the contentious bill, gained so much popularity globally. The build-up to the street demos saw young Kenyans on different social media platforms record short clips educating others on various sections of the bill, which they termed as punitive, while some translated the bill into bite-sized chunks and in their native languages.
I'm Marvin Mabonga. I come from Kimilili constituency.
On the 5th of July this year, President William Ruto made true his promise to host an X-Space to engage with the Gen Z. Over 900,000 listeners tuned in, despite the frequent hitches that finally saw influencer Osama Otero hosting it.
Listening to the feedback today on X, I think I have gone home with, I need to listen more. I need more empathy.
The tech community coming together and looking for new ways to disseminate information. The doctors coming together and forming an association wakituambia kama kuna protest kesho, we'll have our booth in a certain point so that when you're injured, you're going to be treated for free. Seeing even the PR, communications, influencers and all that family coming together and assisting in whatever way they can.
And so there is so much free flow of information. We need to hop on that train. We need to know, what does the Constitution say about this? What are my rights? What are my privileges? What are my responsibilities?
The focal point of the effort by the protesters has so far morphed into a fact-finding mission of what the ruling government has undertaken, with the young people creating platforms accessible to the public.
Because there is not enough water for the residents in Eldoret. And this one was supposed to provide 23 million liters per day.
Previously, we have had some semi-officials and NGOs and people like that saying they are doing civic education, and they usually targeted in small places. But here we have mass mobilization by the youth themselves involved, which is a new phenomenon in itself.
Young people in Africa are expected to make 42% of the global youth population by 2030.
So with this kind of a youth pulse, how critical is civic awareness, particularly in Kenya, in the coming years?
Many of them do not have IDs. And so they need to press to get the ID there. Because you cannot register unless you have what? An ID. And that's a major drawback. For those who have IDs, then ensure that they register. So you have two levels of operation. Ensure that every 18-year-old has a valid ID. And then ensure that every 18-year-old who has a valid ID register to vote. And then ensure that on the voting day they turn out to vote. That's those 3 steps. So if the spirit they appear to have continues, then they will have a big impact on who becomes president.
Recent data by the National Population Policy for Sustainable Development and PPSD shows that the number of youth between ages 15 and 34 is expected to reach 22.3 million in 2030.
Ya kuboresha uongozi wa taifa.
Stanley Nyaringita, TV 47.
Alafu na track record ya mtu.
All right, thank you, Stanley. And on that note, we would like to begin our conversation tonight. And to help us understand this a little better and to share some insight is a gentleman from an organization called Uraia. Your name is John.
Yes.
John Kamande. Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to TV 47.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Pleasure is ours. Now, you just saw that piece that was airing a few moments ago. What stood out for you?
Yeah, I think we're living in a very interesting time. We are seeing an awakening from the young people in Kenya who have come out and taken lead in disseminating knowledge and awareness creation to the citizen and the masses. And we saw this, of course, epitomized by the recent turnout during the Reject Finance Bill protest. And Victor, I must say that incident, or that moment that we saw the change and the awakening in Kenya did not happen overnight. It is a sum total and a product of so many years of investment on civic education by various partners. And the beauty about it is that we are having a generation that is taking up the role, actually coming and disputing what has been believed before, that young people are not involved. They are taking lead. I've seen some artists there who are my good friends, like Silways, Willie Oeba. I've seen a number of, even Mike Mushiri, an influencer, who took lead in translating the finance bill, into various languages to make sure that other people could understand. So I think it's quite an opportune time to celebrate the efforts of young people and the many other people who took part over time in the recent history to emphasize and to put to light the need for a civic awareness on matters to do with, of course, public finance management, which is one of the issues that was very prominent on that.
Right. Now, on the matter of turnout, during the finance bill protests, anti-finance bill protests, we saw a massive turnout of young people, not just in the capital, Nairobi, but across the country. So many youth came out to express themselves. But just a couple of years before, in the general election of 2022, the turnout question was something entirely different. I think the figures that we have show us that at that time, about 8 million, just at the end of 2021, just when when they were taking that cycle, the 18 to 24-year-olds, the people who were joining the population of eligible voters, was about 8 million people. 8 million people were eligible to vote, which is the largest youth electorate in Kenyan history at that time. We think 2027 is going to be a whole lot more different, which represents about 20% of the total electorate. But the actual turnout in May, actually, forgetting the election, just the registration of the votes, the people that came out to register, in May, just a few months later, when IBC ended that, was just 2.3 million. 8 million eligible, only 2.3 million show up to actually take the voting cards. And an even smaller percentage of those 2.3 million showed up on voting day to actually vote. So talk to me about this issue of turnout. What was the issue then? Let's go back in time. What was the issue back then that led to these low numbers, these low manifestation of potential?
Yeah, I think very, very spot on to trace back the history. And what you've just mentioned about IBC anticipated to register around 6 million. They ended up registering a decimal 2.3. And this is a culmination of so many years where we're seeing a lot of hesitation and disenfranchisement of young people in matters, elections and overall democratic processes. That's something that we noted. And I think...
Why? Would you care to tell us why?
Yeah, well, this is compounded. It's compounded with many issues. One of them, of course, young people for a long time did not believe or did not have confidence in the electoral process in Kenya. Number two, we have a lot of issues with our elections in terms of the delivered promises, the promises made and what is being delivered. And we saw a lot of people shying away from taking up these positions. But when you journey through time and look at the statistics, especially in the recent month, which you have just mentioned, we are seeing again a change and an increase, which is a very encouraging trend. And of course, this can be attributed to so many other issues. You remember very well, apart from the finance bill this year in 2024, last year's finance bill was also contentious, but we did not see the same kind of reaction. Of course, there were jitters here and there, but we did not see the kind of response, the kind of organization and dissent that came out this year. And which tells you that as much as we are seeing people being disenfranchised, people are listening. And civic education is actually working. And that's why, ultimately, because I think one of the things I really want to give it to those who organized the awareness around finance bill. A lot of my colleagues, of course, have been doing this. For your information, Victor, finance bill is a document that has been there ever since. Since even the promulgation of the Constitution and the start of the revolution, for instance, in 2010 and 2013.
There have been finance bills.
There have been finance bills, but it's only the last 2 years.
The last 2 years.
The last 2 years is when we are seeing. Why do you think so? It's because this time around we had a tactical approach, and I think we can give it all to all the organizers and the people who are trying to create awareness around this issue, because they were able to put it on an issue-based perspective. People could relate it. I remember some of the contentious bills that were being fronted there. For instance, last year there was housing levy. This year there was issues to do, of course, with even digital content creation and levies and taxes on people who are making money online. And so when these people, and I think all the stakeholders and the ecosystem of civic educators were able to contextualize and put this information in a way that resonates, in a way that touches or relates to the issues of young people, it's when this awakening was spurred.
But do you think this was the missing link before? Because, I mean, there's been thousands of people whose job it is to actually do civic education, out of passion, out of employment, or out of necessity. But do you think this bit, where making this relatable, was this the missing link?
Well, not exactly. But of course, to some extent, I think we could have done better before. But because ideally, of course, apart from it being relatable, there's also a component of we're living in a very young people are digital natives. We are living in a highly informative context. Yeah. So information, of course, this relatability together with the platforms that were able to avail this information, the increased use and the penetration of the internet, social media platforms, and the kind of organizing that happens around those spaces is also what brought together some of these issues. I can tell you for sure that yes, we have been doing tailored civic education ourselves as Uraia Trust, together with our partners across the country. We have been developing content that is relatable. We have been doing youth responsive, child friendly, but this only came to light this year when we had an upscale of this kind of approach. So to some extent, it might not necessarily mean that was the only missing link, because it's an amalgamation of so many other factors that happen in between.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what I can contextualize, and I think moving forward, we are seeing the digital space as a very, very active organizing space for civic education.
All right.
And it's changing the game.
It's changing the game.
Yeah.
and I would like to come back to that. My producers would like you to please put the WhatsApp number on the screens so that our dear viewers can send in the feedback and questions, and I'd be happy to sample them live. But here's another bit that was interesting to me. I looked at some numbers from 2022 because sometimes one of the focal points of civic education efforts is really the election cycle. So in the last election cycle that ended 2022, in the run-up to that election, some research actually said that only about half of the respondents of was to become new voters, only about half, let's say about 48 to 50%, only about half of them were confident that they understood the electoral process. I mean, we're talking about huge numbers, completely ignorant or maybe less than well-informed about something as simple as the electoral processes. And we know what happens sometimes when you don't understand something properly, you're either not going to do it or you're liable to be used or misused by those who have a little bit more knowledge than you. Talk to us about how this is likely to change, especially with the tools that are available now, but also with the growing awareness that has been witnessed in the last 2 months.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor, and I'm really loving the fact that you did quite some research in terms of contextualizing some of this, because numbers don't lie. And the thing is, when you look at the history of civic education in Kenya, you'll notice that we have had a lot of discrepancy in terms of availing resources for civic education and voter education for that matter. First of all, principally, it's the duty of government to provide civic education.
But hold on. This is something we all need, folks at home, get this. It is your government's job to educate you or to provide civic education.
Yes, very clear. Both national government and county governments, in fact, even county governments have a bigger mandate. Section 10 of the County Government Act of 2012 mandates that every county government in this country, the 47 of them, should establish departments and focal points for civic education and public participation to facilitate that kind of process. And we are seeing, it will surprise you, half the counties do not have a functional department.
All right. In fact, on that point, John, just before you proceed, I know you have more to answer. You haven't quite had time to answer the question. Please put a pin on it. I want to throw a poll to the people at home.
Okay.
John has just alerted us to a fact, all right? Something that you and I should be experiencing. I want you to send the message to the tablet right here. My producers, please put the WhatsApp number on the screen. And I want the people at home to tell me, have you actually felt the impact of your county government, your local government, wherever you come from, when it comes to civic education on any matter whatsoever? Let me know. Let me know if you've had any impact or you felt it and what it was, and I'll be happy to sample that. Please continue. You're telling us about how things are likely to be different this time around.
Yes.
Tell us why.
Yeah, so when we're seeing government not taking that responsibility, and we're really lucky that we have...
So funding is an issue.
Funding is an issue. Funding is an issue for civic education. Take, for example, one of the mandates of IEBC, because in the election context, was to provide voter education. And I can tell you for sure, and I think colleagues in the sector will agree with me, that as much as it's one of the very critical mandates for IEBC to conduct voter education throughout the electoral cycle, not only towards the election, they only had funds to do this a few months, probably less than 6 months towards the election. Again, at the same time, there are a lot of operational activities happening at IEBC in terms of organizing for the general public.
And the training,
the water view.
Government.
Yes. So it is very limited. Then it becomes very limited for them to penetrate other spaces. And that's why we're seeing so many actors who have come to salvage the situation. But honestly speaking, this is a duty that government needs to take seriously. We need to see the same allocations. And we're seeing crazy spends by county governments. I don't want to mention, but you had the Auditor General report citing some very crazy expenditures. And one of the principal...
Millions on flowers.
On a crate of soda. Yeah. But departments, critical departments like the civic education and public participation, not only even have been institutionalized or have been put in place, but they don't even receive funding. They don't receive commensurate in terms of personnel, training and facilitation for them to do this kind of work. So one of the challenges we had, and I think this is another situation, and I remember when you gave the analogy when we started this bulletin, you mentioned about 2.5 years to the elections. Right now, as we speak, the IBC is supposed to be functional, conducting ongoing voter registration, but that has not started. It's only 2 years to the elections. The government is fully aware of this, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's in public domain.
In fact, on that point, do you think, one would argue that it's almost deliberate, the lack of funding to these very critical organizations and this very critical service, civic education? Would you say it's deliberate and it serves a purpose to keep a vast majority of Kenyans ignorant?
Yeah, it's quite systemic. I think to a large extent it's deliberate. It's to frustrate some of these things, and not to mention that even recently we had a ruling. Take for instance one constituency in northern Kenya, that is Banisa, who unfortunately we lost.
Lost a member of parliament through a road accident.
Yeah. Until today, the people of Banisa
no by-election, no representation, no leadership.
Yeah. The reason why? It's because IBC is not properly constituted in terms of the commission. So some of these issues, when you look at them, it dates back to the commitment we have from our government.
But John, you're saying things are different. You're saying now there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new factor that is, changing the way the game is played. And you're saying it's technology, it's young people, it's the internet, and all the knowledge and wisdom associated with it. You're saying this is a game changer.
Yeah, we are seeing, at least we are seeing a silver lining ahead. And I think what was evident recently from, of course, the Gen Z protests and the recent organizing and the civic awareness by not only Gen Zs but the entire country, we are seeing another crop of advocacy towards affirming or trying to emphasize the need for us to be able to sustain civic education throughout the entire cycle. And I think the other thing I think we need to mention, and I want to acknowledge, I know there is a bill in Parliament sponsored by Senator S.E. Okenyuri, Mheshimiwa, on civic education, which of course will try to bring to light and try to even put more structured kind of engagements in terms of civic education. So part of that is something to do with the efforts that have been there before. And I think why I'm saying that there is some light ahead at the end of the tunnel is because we saw government actually responding to the issues that the Gen Zs brought forward. And one of them was very common and very, very open. Please adhere to the Constitution. If the Constitution says we need to have civic education budgeted for, resourced and undertaken across the country, this is something that needs to be put to light. And I'll tell you, I'm expecting and I remain very hopeful that the coming elections are going to be a defining moment for us, because these people have become more aware and they're becoming more alert. There are things that government can't do anymore. They need to be serious, they need to be tactical, they need to be deliberate in terms of their actions moving forward, in terms of organizing. Because we are dealing with a generation that is quite enlightened. The generation that will wake up today and just switch "we the people," Article 1, or the preamble of the Constitution, and it will trend. And I can tell you, even the mother in the village will know "we the people."
All right.
That power is something that is really exceptional and
never been seen before.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, John, and talk to us, because see, you and your team at Uraia are actually trained to be able to disseminate this information. They say with great power comes great responsibility. I mean, the internet gives us great power in terms of reach, in terms of access to information. But how do we make sure this information is used properly so we don't get cases of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, people using what looks like a legit bit of news or bit of information, twisting it to be able to confuse others. They say the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Those people who masquerade as the one-eyed people, the ones who have some insight into what's going on, how do we protect this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that, of course, part of our work, and I think we did acknowledge the challenge that we are living in a very digital active and a space where information could easily be distorted. And I think one of the ways that we are trying to address this gap is to ensure that we provide, number one, factual and timely information out there. And then, of course, approaching civic education with the lenses of ensuring that it's relatable and more practical. Yeah,
like the Gen Zs did.
Like the Gen Zs did, because the Gen Zs were organizing around one document. I can tell you there's so many public financial budget documents that are actually worked on until we reach the section where we need to work on the finance bill for it to become an act. In fact, it's one of the last documents. So if we can organize around the cycle, we can probably be actively engaged in every step, and not only knowing, but relating with it. I remember the live stream of the voting of the finance bill at Parliament. Everybody was glued to their screens. Everybody was listening. My MP, did he say yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So
we can greet them.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting perspective. But one way to actually counter misinformation and disinformation is to make it relatable. Let people know the decision at hand. Let people know the implication. I'm sure the finance bill, everybody was speaking about it because we had a very, very thorough analysis and a lot of focus on it. So it makes it more objective. And of course, we also need to empower more people, more young people. We need to have more civic educators on the ground, providing this information on a regular basis, every day, so that we are able to ensure that what is out there in terms of awareness creation is something that is factual, it's objective, and people can relate to their daily lives.
All right. Now, John, just before, clearly, obviously, this conversation is, we did say the efforts at civic education are bigger. Well, the challenge of civic education is bigger than the efforts. I also dare say that the conversation on civic education is bigger than the time that we have. But I can see some feedback here from some people. Allow me to go through it. Machakos County is doing more public participation than the groundwork. Nothing at all is ever considered. They implement what they think is fit for what they want. That's one person. Another person called Basil Okech. Do you know anyone called that?
Yes.
Basil Okech. Basil Okech says, John Kamande is spot on the face of civic education. Indeed, it has changed. Somebody else says, John has his facts on point. Somebody else says, what's next for civic education? How will we tap into the young people? And I believe you answered some of that, and you can tell us that in your parting shot. What is next for civic education? Another thing is somebody says, the civic education, I say yes, by using Gen Z. Somebody else asked John if he has interacted with Gen Zs and what are his thoughts about their ideology. You can also wrap that up in your parting shot. And somebody else says, civic education is not a priority for politicians. For them, it's never about the people. Civic education is about the people. I believe something about the responsibility of this. And finally, last but not least, our good people at home, she says, hi, my name is Juliet and John is my boss in Nairobi. John, good to see you. I will respond to the question in this way. We have not been well received by many citizens in the past who ask us to pay them in order to engage with them. Having said that, we have made a difference in how Nairobians engage with the governance processes and are looking forward to more Kenyans inviting us to enlighten them more. This is from Uraia. Now, John, this is your camera right here. You've had the two questions that people have asked you. And I know you have something to say as a parting shot. I want to give you an opportunity in a minute to speak to the people of Kenya. This is a conversation that is ongoing. But if you had one thing to say to the people of Kenya, what would you say? Straight away. That's your camera.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's an interesting time to live in Kenyans because, number one, we do not have any inadequacies in terms of laws and policies in this country. We have enough. We have a constitution that speaks so boldly about our duty and its power. We've seen it stand the test of time. We are celebrating 14 years since the promulgation, I think on Tuesday next week. And it's something that we really need to agree. And I've had a few comments from what I've just been shared. People say, for example, what is happening in Machakos, that the public is being involved in public participation, not seeing the real work in the ground. I think one thing we should be very, very positive about is that we have a constitution that was able to put forward the devolved system of governance that brings power closer to the people. And it's a very, very positive point. What we need to shift our focus on is not only participating, but meaningfully engaging in these processes. And I believe that when we saw this uprising and we saw this awakening led by the Gen Zs, and I keep mentioning it, it was not an event that happened overnight. This is an investment for years. This is an investment that started way back. I was speaking with a gentleman who is one of our civic educators in Kiambu. His name is Joseph Kamande. He started civic education in 1963 during the Kenya time. They were printing leaflets, trying to share and advise the masses on what needs to happen. And I can tell you the investments, and he's so proud, and I had a chat with him very recently about what has been happening in this country, is that the little effort that started long time ago are finally bearing fruit. So we don't need to lower our guard as citizens. We need to engage more actively. We need to utilize our personal spaces, beginning with your dining table. Some of you are taking dinner right now. That's the most powerful space to start with to change this country. And I think that's the way to go.
All right, thank you so much, John. You're saying the struggle continues. A luta continua.
A luta continua.
All right, all right. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen at home, thank you so much. Somebody here is saying, love the show on civic education. Somebody else says, for the longest time, CSOs have done civic education to the youth. It's time we are seeing the fruits with the Gen Z revolution. Good job, John and the Uraia Trust. And of course, finally, excellent stuff from John. Our country seriously needs civic education. People of Kenya, like we said, this conversation is bigger than the time that we have. But we want to thank you for choosing us to inform you this evening. And we want to thank you for participating in this debate. John said, keep the conversation going, keep the ball rolling. And of course, the matter of the ball is going to be center stage as VAR, your weekly supercharged sporting show, takes off right, or rather kicks off, right after we exit the studio. This has been John Kamande from Uraia Trust. Thank you so much. You can find them online. They have a lot of information and programs. Thank you so much for coming. My name, good people, is Victor Muyakane, and I bid you good night. Up next, VAR. Good night.